Hi, this is Clint. In this video, I'm going to share with you my experience with hernia repair surgery because I just had it a few weeks ago. Hernia is a very common issue out there, and I'm sure those of you who are watching this, many of you are booked for surgery or at least considering it. Okay, so first of all, hernias, what are they? Well, let's say this is your abdominal wall. A hernia is a hole in the abdominal wall, and parts of your intestine can stick out. That's what happened to me. So in my case, whenever I stood up or sat up, part of my gut would be sticking out, and it results in a bulge. And that's how I kind of became suspicious. Something was a little bit wrong. And whenever I laid down, this would pop back in, and then the bulge would actually flatten out. This is a hernia. So I first noticed this happening last summer. And originally, I thought that this was some type of urological issue. And that's why the first doctor I went to discuss this little issue was my urologist. And when I showed it to him, he said, "No, you've got a hernia." Now, he said it wasn't urgent, but eventually I should get it fixed up. And that's because the problem that could happen over time is when your gut sticks out like this, there's a potential it may get stuck, sticking out. And they call this a suffocated hernia. So what happened here is that it won't go back in by itself. And it could get stuck and start to lose blood supply. And when part of your intestine starts to lose blood supply, that's bad news. I could end up in emergency. So I did opt to get it fixed. So I started doing some research, but at the same time, it was a bit of a wait, which was okay because since it wasn't urgent, I was pretty well allowed to carry a normal life until my surgery date. In fact, I even snow skied almost every day during our winter season up here. And it wasn't a problem. There was no pain. I didn't feel the hernia. I actually did buy a hernia belt from Amazon. Turns out I didn't even need it. So after about 1 or 2 outings, I even stopped using the hernia belt. Okay, so before I booked my surgery, I did some research on the different surgical options. So in general, there are 3 major categories of hernia repair surgeries. The newest one is called robotic, and that's not available, at least in my area up here, because I live in a smaller center. And then the other 2 main categories are what they call open surgeries and laparoscopic surgeries. Now, with open surgery, what the surgeon does is that he or she cuts a big incision right across the abdominal wall, goes in, and then repairs the surgery. They could also use a mesh, which is, as it sounds, it's like a cloth type of, like a J cloth, and it's like a foreign cloth material. Well, I don't know what it's made of, maybe plastic, but they put something to cover up that hole. We'll talk about mesh a little bit later on. Now, with open surgery, there's also one technique called the shouldice technique. And this was specialized at a private hospital called the Shouldice Hospital. It's world renowned. I actually have access to the Shouldice Hospital if I want, because I only live about 2 hours north of Toronto. Now, upon more research, I found out that the Shouldice technique, they don't use mesh. So it's great for people who don't want to use mesh inside their bodies. If they're opposed to using any type of foreign object in their body, there might be some controversy out there with using mesh because, number one, it could cause allergic reactions. But the more I looked up on this, it's mainly with those who are a little bit immunocompromised that have allergic reactions. Now, the other main issue is that the mesh could shift around and get dislodged. But if you're willing to risk it, that's fine, because you have to be really careful in the recovery period and not to get it dislodged. You have to give it some time to basically hold on to where it's supposed to hold on. So I was willing to take that risk. And personally for me, I don't have a problem with any foreign objects inside my body. I already have a metal screw inside one of my knees and I don't feel it. So I was okay with that. Now, the other thing I found out about the Shouldice technique is that it has very high success rates, but because it's still an open surgery, the recovery can potentially be a little bit longer. It could be a little more painful, and the way they're doing this surgery with their own style or technique is that they're using your tissues and they'll tug them around and overlap them and then suture them in place. But because they're shifting the tissues around, you could potentially feel a little more tugging inside. But that's what it was, and they have a 3-night minimum stay. So I decided against the shouldice technique because I wanted something else, which was the laparoscopic surgery. Now the laparoscopic technique, it's instead of making a big incision on your abdominal wall, they just do 3 small incisions. One for a camera, because they insert a camera so they can see what they're doing, and then the other 2 are for the surgical instruments. And this is also how they would insert a mesh. The benefits of a laparoscopic surgery is that it's less invasive, which could mean a faster recovery period, much less pain, and in our case, I didn't have to stay at the hospital. It's a same-day surgery. I could go home the same day, so that was quite appealing to me. So I made my choice and said, okay, I want the laparoscopic surgery, which is one of the standards in hernia surgery. Now, by the time I got this booked with my surgeon, who's a general surgeon, this was 6 months down the road. So basically, again, I got diagnosed in the end of the summer, which was actually in the September, and my surgery was booked for April. That's how things work up here in Canada. Okay, we do have to wait for our surgeries. But anyways, it wasn't bad because, as I mentioned before, I was able to snow ski the entire winter, and timing worked out well because as soon as our ski season ended, my surgery day came up. Okay, so surgery day. Again, because it's laparoscopic surgery, I didn't have to have a hospital stay over. It was a day surgery and I went home the same afternoon. Now, because I had general anesthesia, the hospital did put a rule on me. They said, I need somebody to pick me up at the hospital. They wouldn't let me drive. I had to have somebody to bring me home and actually stay with me for the next day or so, especially overnight, because of the possible effects of a general anesthetic. They were kind of afraid that I might stumble around at home or fall on the stairs, which is fair enough. Okay, so I had a PSW, or a personal support worker, get me from the hospital, bring me home, and before we got home, we dropped by at the pharmacy because I was prescribed some painkillers, and we got home and it was no problems. About an hour after I got home, I was sitting there with my PSW just having a nice friendly chat, and then I noticed, I feel a little bit wet somewhere. So I picked up my shirt, and sure enough, the middle incision had blood oozing out. So it started bleeding out. So the PSW and I, we got me to lie upstairs in my bedroom. Basically, I was lying down. She got on the phone with the hospital recovery nurse, and they said, okay, change the dressing and put an ice pack on and just put direct pressure. And sure enough, within about 30 minutes, all the bleeding stopped. And that was really the only complication. I didn't have much pain after the surgery, but as you'll see from this first photo, which was taken about a day after my surgery, there was a lot of swelling. I blew up like a balloon. I felt kind of pregnant, actually. And there was bruising there, but there wasn't much pain. I was able to walk around okay. I was pretty mobile. I didn't really require any assistance. And because there was no pain, but I did feel a little bit tender. I felt a bit tight at points, and that's because of the swelling, the inflammation. Now, the other side effect that I had was down my throat. I had an irritated throat, and that could come from any surgery because during the surgery, they put an air tube down your throat. And that's what was causing my irritated throat. So for the first night was pretty bad. I only slept about 3 hours. Also because of the irritation, or not irritation, but the swelling in my abdomen, I couldn't really sleep on my favorite position in bed, which was on the side. It felt a little bit uncomfortable. So I had to sleep on my back, which is not my favorite position to sleep. Now the next morning, my GI tract, or my bowel movements, haven't come back yet, which is completely normal after surgery. I remember when I had knee surgery, I was constipated for 5 days. Now in this case, same thing happened, but not for 5 days. It was only for 2 days. So by the second day, everything did come back to normal. So that was pretty good. As soon as I can, they did want me to be a little bit active, which actually increases blood circulation to the surgical site, and that promotes healing. So after I did my first walk around the neighborhood, everything was fine, and the PSW was dismissed. So for the rest of the week, I was on my own, and it's a good thing that I stocked up in groceries, because one of the things about the surgical recovery is that I'm not allowed to lift anything over 5 pounds, because they want to give that mesh enough time to hold in place. A couple of times a day, I put an ice pack, and the ice pack was for about 15 minutes at a time, and that helped, I think. I also had about 5 days worth of prescriptions. I finished all that, and really I'm not sure if it did anything, because again, I didn't have much pain, but the swelling was there, so I was able to walk around, but I was a little bit slow, and things were a little bit tender, so slow and steady. So that was basically my first week. Now for my second week in recovery, and here's a photo of it, you can see that the bandages have changed. So I decided to basically clean everything up, take a shower, and then change the main bandages. Underneath the bandages were steri strips. These are smaller surgical strips that they put in there to hold the absorbable stitches in place. So we left the steri strips in place, and all I did was change the top big dressings, and that's where you see the big dressings on the photograph there. And as you can see, much of the swelling has already gone down, and much of the bruising has started to disappear as well. So that was for the second week. And for this second week, because of the swelling going down, I was able to finally get into my car, which is a Mustang, so it's got low seating. But I was able to get in my car and finally go around town to do some small errands. So my mobility sort of came back. My walks were getting a little bit better, but I still had a little bit of swelling there that I couldn't wear regular pants yet, because the regular pants still felt a little bit tight. So that's okay, I just wore sweatpants the whole time. Now for week 3, you can see that the main dressings have already come off. I didn't feel I needed the main dressings anymore, so all that was left underneath were the steri strips. And you can see that the middle set of steri strips are darker, because that was where the original bleed was during my first day. So the whole thing is they wanted me to leave the steri strips in place and just let them fall off by themselves. But as you can see from the photograph here, most of the swelling, most of the bruising have already disappeared. I really start to feel that I've recovered almost back to normal. And that was a good thing. Now the next photograph is basically going into week 4. Now here, the steri strips start to fall off. So I still have the one up at the very top around my navel, but the other ones have fallen off, and you can see there's a slight dark line underneath. That's the one below my navel. And that's actually the incision where I originally bled out. And as you can see, the scar is minimal. Same one with the one that's lower underneath, which my pants are covering. So I was pretty impressed with the laparoscopic surgery. The scars are very minimal. You can hardly notice it. I don't feel any pain, don't feel swelled up anymore, and the bruising's all gone. So I was pretty well on the road to recovery. Now, as I'm shooting this video, I'm going into week 5, because altogether I still have 2 more weeks of recovery officially, because it's a 6-week recovery. So the next 2 weeks, even though I look more normal, I'm still not allowed to lift anything over 5 pounds, which is a bit of a challenge, because I'm an active type of person, but I'm going to stick to the routine because I don't want a reoccurrence. I'm doing my walks every day, and I'm doing them at a relatively quick pace. I'm supposed to get a follow-up with my surgeon this week, so he's going to tell me what I'm allowed and what I'm not allowed to do. But I look forward to the end of the 6 weeks, when hopefully I'm able to start easing into my normal activities. So hopefully this was helpful. Thank you very much for watching. I chose a laparoscopic surgery with a mesh, and so far so good. It's been a pretty easy surgery, and hopefully everything will hold and you'll make the right choice for yourself. And good luck with your surgery.